a museum like this in Britain. And since I came up with this idea, the support I've had has been quite surprising and widespread and exciting. So even today I have a Twitter account called @CommunistTerror, and I asked various people to retweet an image which I put up on this, and Dan Hannan did it, and Toby Young did, and Matt Ridley. There's been enormous support for this, particularly on the right wing. I'm desperately keen to get somebody from the left in order to associate themselves with this project, because we're wanting to be a charity and we need to be non-party political. The problem, I also had support internationally. There is an organisation in America called the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, which had a massive conference in Washington recently, which I went to. They are supportive. There's an organisation in Russia called Memorial, which has acted under great danger for many years, and they have been supportive. It's just all over the world there are people who are deeply worried about what is happening and the resurgence of Marxist ideas. The problem is this, that the young generation, the next lot of people coming along, have no idea about communism or communist terror. And they actually, to such an extent, that they actually associate, we have the first slide, they associate crimes against humanity more with Tony Blair and George Bush than with Mao Zedong. Only 20% associate Mao Zedong with crimes against humanity, but 34 and 39% with Blair and Bush. And you may think this is astonishing, but I can give you the explanation for it. We have the next slide. They have never heard of Mao Zedong. They literally do not know about it. This doesn't seem very clear, is it? Percentage of people of 16 to 24-year-olds who have never heard of Adolf Hitler. They've all heard of Adolf Hitler, basically. Most of them have heard of Stalin. Half of them have heard of Lenin, but 70% have never heard of the person responsible for more deaths in the 20th century than any other individual. It's an extraordinary reflection on the educational system in this country, and indeed the sort of people who are teaching it and controlling it. As you probably know, Marx suggested that socialism would be a stepping stone towards communism. Marx never intended you go straight to communism. He saw socialism as a stepping stone. And this is the view that people have of socialism. Can you have the next slide? Nearly twice as many people have a very or somewhat favourable view of socialism. This is young people than unfavourable. So socialism is now viewed favourably, overwhelmingly, by young people in this country. And
well, they're supporting ex-Coldplay, aren't they?
Sorry?
Thank
you. This makes them very susceptible to politicians who are actually neo-communists, like Corbyn and McDonnell. And they don't have any intellectual defence against it, because they think they A, don't know much about it, and B, what view they do have is sort of very favourable. There are also now apologists. It's a changing, getting worse and worse. There are now apologists in senior positions for communism, for the deaths that took place under communism. And I'm thinking particularly of Seamus Milne, the communications director for the Labour Party, who, can we go to the next slide, who wrote an article in, I think it's 2006, saying the number of victims, sorry about the apostrophe, of Stalin's terror has been progressively inflated over recent years. Communism in the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe and elsewhere delivered rapid industrialization, mass education, job security and huge advances in social and gender equality. Well, who cares about 20 million people who die if you've got, you know, rapid industrialization. I mean, it's almost certainly not true. This is probably a line that was put out by people like Hobsbawm, who were the communist writers of the history and who bigged up the industrialization. And I'd been based on Soviet figures, which of course were unreliable. But the idea that it doesn't really matter that millions of people die, even if these things were true, is inherently shocking. And anyway, he thinks they've been inflated. This is not just Seamus Milne, though. Seamus Milne's bad enough. I mean, he's so close to Corbyn and MacDonald. But it also reaches the entire curriculum. The curriculum in the schools is now grey-washing. I won't say whitewashing, because it does admit that a number of people died. Yes, unfortunate. But it tries to sort of reframes it. Can we have the next slide? This is from Bite Size, which is made by the BBC. This is a revision guide for students at our schools now. And look at the way it's framed. Collectivization, this is collectivization of farms. By the end of the 1920s, it was clear that Russian agriculture was inadequate. Although the kulaks, those are the moderately better, slightly better off peasants, were relatively wealthy and successful, the thousands of tiny backward peasant farms were not producing enough to feed the population. So where have you got these bad peasants who really are incompetent, who need to be helped? And then in 1927, Stalin declared the way forward, what a phrase to use, was for people in each village to voluntarily unite their farms in one collective farm. He was trying to help. He was trying to help. This Kolhots would be available, would be able to afford machinery, be more efficient, be able to create a surplus to send to the towns. This is on the BBC produces this.
And it's bite size, isn't it?
Bite size. And so he was trying, the way it's framed, I mean, they go on to admit that people died, but it's framed in a way to suggest that the peasants were incompetent and Stalin